Welcome back to the channel. So it's been a long time since I've been on. A lot of things going on, a lot of little projects to kind of keep me busy in the works. We're still back to making Cowboys content, of course, but some new things coming out on the channel. So now I'm launching a new podcast. You may have seen the trailer. It's called the Freshman 15 Podcast, hosted by me, alongside Tyler Moore of More Outdoors, who you should follow on Twitter at CrypticGhost2. Great Cowboys follow, which is probably why you guys are here checking out this video. So today it's a little bit different in my normal content format where I have videos and a voiceover over it and some clips. But today I want to do something totally different. First time doing on the channel, off script, just off the top of the head, talking Cowboys. Today's video, if you've seen, you click on the link, obviously you know it's going to be talking about the list that was posted today by ESPN, talking about the top 10 quarterbacks according to scouts, front office people, media members, whomever the case is around the NFL landscape. And not too dissimilar from my old content before, the Blow the Whistle series, which you guys can still totally check out on my channel, where I talk about some narratives about the Cowboys that I debunk and break down. So if you want to go back to some of those old videos, check them out, see where I kind of break down the Dak Prescott versus Carson Wentz debate. Eagles fans are still hating on that video. Definitely go hit it. Here's the link above right here. You guys can check it out. But today I wanted to discuss this top 10 list by ESPN. And I'm going to post it right now on the channel so you guys can see it. But in this list, they had mentioned, I'm checking out my phone right now. In this list, they had mentioned the top 10 quarterbacks on the get up of ESPN, of course, where they talk about, according to league executives, scouts, coaches, and players, who they have in their top 10 list of quarterbacks. Not so surprising, Dak Prescott is near the bottom of that list. You get used to it. It happens. So when looking at the list that I see, you have at number 1, Aaron Rodgers, 2, Patrick Mahomes, 3, Josh Allen, 4, Tom Brady, 5, Joe Burrow, 6, Matthew Stafford, 7, Tustin Herbert, 8, Russell Wilson, 9, Deshawn Watson, and then at 10, we have Dak Prescott. So what I want to do today is kind of look at this list, and again, free-flowing, no script, no edits, nothing like that, or no too heavy edits at least. Kind of take a talk about this list one by one, 1 through 10, and kind of make the comparison as far as where Dak Prescott is. Not so much a comparison of Dak Prescott versus the field, but so much to kind of let you guys know how narratives work and how I believe narratives work around the NFL media and the ones that cover it. Again, fans, coaches, writers, whomever. To start us off with, when it comes to this list right here that we're talking about, league execs, coaches, scouts, and players. Talking about the players for a second. Players that make these lists, and you guys are familiar with the NFL Top 100 that comes out every single season, talking about players where they rank, how they're seen by their peers, and things of that nature. I always take those with a grain of salt. I never try to use those in any type of debate or context or argument. And the reason why I don't do that is that a lot of players around the NFL, the players they see as great players, the players that they give a lot of credence to, some of it is done out of honesty and being very forthcoming about how they feel. But also you have to bear in mind the players that you are so comparing and kind of putting on this apples to oranges comparison on these listings, you're playing against them, or you're not playing against them at all. And at the same time, that guy's performing that you have on your list or don't have on your list, you're playing at the same time. So it's almost like being in the same field as someone or same industry as somebody, yet you never see their work firsthand, unless you're watching them on film, which doesn't always happen because not every team plays every team on their schedule every season. So again, I take how players feel about some other players, most times with a grain of salt. And scouts are one thing. You can praise the scouts all you like, but scouts make mistakes too. That's why we have a draft. That's why we have busts. We have steals and gems of the draft. Scouts do make mistakes, and not just scouts with the NFL draft, but scouts as well at the pro level and the pro personnel scouts. They make mistakes all the time. So I always implore people to make their own assessments as well. Do your own homework, do your own research. Don't just take it from me or somebody on TV with a suit. Of course, be analytical and question everything if you're not sure. And then also, speaking of these coaches, it's the same thing with the scouts. Coaches, they get hired, they get fired, they come and go, as you guys have seen in the past. And the coaches are not always right, and they're not always forthcoming either. There's a lot of coach speak, and why wouldn't that take place on a list like this that's supposed to be confidential? Not everyone likes to show you their hand, so why let every coach on this list? Again, do your own homework, do your own assessments. And then lastly, executives. it's the same thing with executives. I'll tell you in that regard. Even the execs you see on TV, the former guys that are on ESPN network now, they used to be in the front office, guys like Mike Tannenbaum. A lot of these guys, they hold their prejudices, they hold their biases. So I don't expect them to always be truthful or to not come off a preconceived notion about certain players, whether that's good or bad. So with that layer, with that texture, before I begin to go through this list one by one and kind of explain how that pertains to Dak Prescott and again, the NFL media at large, let's kind of get started. So Aaron Rodgers. I'm not going to debate Aaron Rodgers and where you have him on your list. If you think he's the top quarterback in the NFL, I'm not going to fight you over that. The media, of course, has always had this thing with Aaron Rodgers for a long time. And to his credit, a lot of the reputation he's given is deserved. It is earned. Aaron Rodgers is a very accurate, mobile quarterback who can create plays outside of the scope of the offense, let's say, or, as far as what's scripted and improvised. He still can do that. He's still lethal. He's still a quarterback. When you see him on your schedule, you roll your eyes because you know what you might be in for. And that's totally okay. I'm not denying that. I'm not knocking that. But the one thing that I'll say when it comes to media and how they perceive quarterbacks and how they judge quarterbacks, they judge them based on wins. And when you talk about players like Dak Prescott, you point out the things that are good about Dak Prescott, what he has done in the NFL. They like to say, well, what has he done lately? Use that same logic with Aaron Rodgers for a second. Aaron Rodgers has not won anything substantial in the playoffs or been to a Super Bowl in the last 12 years. And to keep it a $1,000, that title that he won was on the back of his defense, largely on the back of his defense. And also in the title game in which he played against, actually, not just the title game, but in the games that he played in that postseason to get to the Super Bowl to win the championship, he played against the Atlanta Falcons, who are known as choking in the playoffs. He played against Michael Vick, who was reformed with the Eagles, but still wasn't a premier threat from the pocket, no matter how well he played in that one season. And then, of course, in the title game, he didn't play against the starting quarterback of the Bears. He played against Caleb Haney, which was a game largely aided by his defense to win the championship against Pittsburgh. And to that point, he's not won a championship in 12 years. Not only that, has he not won a title in 12 years, Aaron Rodgers has lost 4 times in the playoffs to these quarterbacks, Jimmy Garoppolo and Colin Kaepernick. That's 4 losses in the playoffs to those quarterbacks who we don't think are very good quarterbacks, if we're being honest. And then the last time he faced Jimmy Garoppolo in the playoffs, couldn't muster hardly any offense with this team at home in the NFC title game. In the divisional round. So let's put it that way. Moving on to number 2 on the list is Patrick Mahomes. For Pat Mahomes is kind of in the same boat as Aaron Rodgers, where he's accomplished so much so early in his career that it's hard to say anything bad about him without the national media or people who co-sign the national media to jump down your throat. And to Patrick's case, he has a lot of the traits that you like, similar to Aaron Rodgers. Improvisation, strong arm outside of the pocket, has put up prolific numbers at MVP and has a championship under his belt. So again, when it comes to Patrick Mahomes, I completely understand that. Now, when it comes to Patrick Mahomes, he is held to a higher standard, or he's given a pass for playing at a higher standard, but isn't quite criticized nearly as much, in my opinion, as he probably should. Still, great player, great quarterback. If he's number 2 on your list, I'm not going to charge you for it. I understand he's accomplished a lot in his career, so it's fair to put him in number 2, but he's not without his warts. I'm not, again, when it comes to him versus Dak Prescott, there's not much I can argue with in that case. As to where they are in their careers, Dak beginning his career in 2016, Mahomes in 2017, with a high apex the following season in 2018. I'll give him that. Now, number 3 on the list, if you've seen it, is Josh Allen. In the case of Josh Allen, I'm going to reserve talking about Allen for a second because I'm going to lump him with somebody else on this list later on. So we'll skip Allen for now, but kind of keep him in the back of your head. So number 4 on the list, here we have Tom Brady. Tom Brady at this point is held at number 4 on your list, or on this list in particular. No problem with Tom Brady being held at number 4. Tom Brady still is a very prolific player, prolific passer, who, if you look at the numbers in Tampa, he's lighting it up. And it's not being aided by a running game necessarily. He's still dropping back with a lot of reinforcement with weapons, and he produces with what he has. The only thing keeping him at number 4, maybe not higher on this list in particular, is his age, which is starting to show a little bit as far as the mobility. But then again, Tom Brady was never that much of a mobile passer to begin with anyway, even eluding rushers in the pocket. But again, Tom's at number 4. winning quarterback. He's my personal GOAT quarterback. I don't know about how you guys feel about that. Let me know in the comment section if you want to. But I think number 4 is totally fine with Tom Brady versus him and Dak Prescott. Not much of a comparison there, so I'm not going to really front on that one. Joe Burrow, though, is one that I kind of have to look at in number 5. And for Joe Burrow to be this high on the list kind of cements what I think about the biases that people have with national media and quarterbacks and how they see quarterbacks around the NFL. I've always said this to people on Twitter, and if you're following me on Twitter, it's at SDQ Flight Crew, by the way. And also, while I'm talking about this, if you guys like this type of content that I'm doing, once again, I remind you guys, hit the like button, hit the sub button. I'm trying to get to about 500 subs sometime before the season kicks off in September. So hitting the sub button, hitting the like button, even commenting does a lot to grow the channel. It just helped me out a bunch, and it costs you absolutely nothing. So hit that sub button if you guys don't mind. But I want to talk about Joe Burrow. And I've always said that when it comes to quarterbacks, they have story arcs. I think the way they're covered by the NFL media, quarterbacks have the same arc. And I'll explain what I mean by that. I've always thought that quarterbacks have it where they have split their story arcs, if you will, in 2 separate timelines. You have timeline A, where quarterback X, whatever the case may be, quarterback X is a young quarterback, comes into the league, and by set of circumstances that he has, maybe a good supporting cast, comes out of nowhere, and all of a sudden this quarterback tends to kind of take the reins of a franchise, and they see tangible success, regardless of what's around the quarterback, whether it's great help around the quarterback, whether it's a great defense, a great running game. When the young quarterback emerges as the quarterback on a successful team early in his career, the national narrative you see is this quarterback is the one to watch out for. So immediately everything he does successful as far as a winning effort, all the praise goes to the quarterback. And we know how the NFL works, that a lot of the praise goes to the quarterback. Not too much blame goes to him, but early on in their careers, quarterbacks that succeed early and have success, they are given a lot of light and given a lot of praise. And we've seen this before in the NFL with guys like Russell Wilson or guys like Mark Sanchez. And despite what they're doing and how much of the heavy lifting that they're doing, a lot of those quarterbacks get a lot of kudos and a lot of praise. And so when that guy cashes in on success, meaning if it's going to the conference title game like Mark Sanchez, or winning a Super Bowl like Russell Wilson, or in the case of Joe Burrow, necessarily, of making it to Super Bowl early in their career, they're given a lot of praise and a lot of push and a lot of support. And I think that's all well and good. But when it comes to Joe Burrow, you've only seen him do this for one season. And if he's in top 5 in this ranking or top 5 in this list with one season under his belt, it's way too small of a sample size to think this guy can do this again. And mind you, he's playing in a pretty tough conference and playing in a pretty tough division with Baltimore. And the Browns, who you think are going to be the Browns we'll talk about in another video. But you still think about this, even looking at this list, if he's your top 5 guy and he's already been given the praise as the elites or one of the next elites on the way up, then looking at this list here, there's at least 5 quarterbacks in the same company. No, I'm sorry, 6 in the AFC, I believe, on this list. So he has 6 on this list in the AFC. How does he follow up that act in a class among his peers? Does that make sense? So to me, when it comes to Joe Burrow, to give him all this praise, all this kudos, and again, with the fulfillment of the story arc of these quarterbacks, if Joe Burrow doesn't succeed or he doesn't get to that next level, what they're going to do is they're going to give him the praise, then they're going to turn on him. And then he's going to become a quarterback who then is deemed as overrated when they gave him the initial push to begin with in an upper echelon class. So that's kind of what I say when quarterbacks have story arcs, they recycle the same thing with quarterbacks. Young quarterback on the rise, he's one to watch out for. Then he's given the tab of elite if he reaches a large point of tangible success. Then he falls back on his face and becomes overrated by the media if he doesn't push forward to fulfill the prophecy they gave to him initially. So that's where I say it's kind of a weird scenario. And then with other quarterbacks as well, they're young and they have talent, they have skill, but they don't quite win off the bat. Then all of a sudden they get the push, then they become earlier, they advance that process of being overrated quickly because they haven't achieved that tangible success right away, like your Dak Prescott or maybe Tony Romo or Kirk Cousins. and they're in that constant loop of fighting a battle. But we'll talk more about Dak in a moment. Now, number 6 on the list. The same way I talk about quarterbacks that are given story arcs and are given a lot of praise in the media and given a pass, that applies to Matt Stafford. And I've always thought with Matt Stafford, he's been given a lot of I guess the word is pity by the national media. He's been given a lot of pity by the national media and given a lot of, oh, it's not his fault, it's Detroit. And I've always felt like for the longest time, the national media has always wanted to give something to Matt Stafford, or give him an award for being a talented player on a bad franchise, but without holding him to any type of critique on his own for what he's done to not add more to that franchise. And I've been critical on the channel before when it comes to Matt Stafford and say that, he may put up great numbers, but he hasn't led his team to a division title, hasn't led his team to a playoff win. He did on a much better team, and I give him that. And he won the championship. I'd give him that. But I've always likened someone like Matt Stafford, similar to Chris Paul in the NBA, that the media that surrounds that sport wants to artificially give his legacy more than it would actually deserve and would have actually given. And if anything, when it comes to narratives by the national media, and that's who I'm focusing this video on, is the national media and their perceptions, is that they've always given that to Matt Stafford. And so there is a confirmation bias in the media based on having a set forth narrative about a player for the longest time, that when he finally achieves that narrative, now you can kind of beat the table for him and kind of give him that kudos and give him that praise. So I think when it comes to Matt Stafford and how unfair the media can be, is that they've always kind of had a battery in their back, so to speak, to praise quarterbacks based on things like their arm talent, if you will, arm talent, draft status, and has that kind of coincide with something like Dak Prescott. And if you look at the comment section, I'm sure you guys follow me on Twitter at SDQ Flight Crew, you'll see that a lot of times people that argue about where Dak Prescott is ranked and where he belongs amongst their top 10 list, it's based on things like, well, he was a 4th round pick, or, well, he doesn't have a big time arm, or, those limitations, things that really are superficial when it comes to playing quarterback at a high level. Those things actually are used as a strike against Dak Prescott versus trying to assess more intricately parts of playing quarterback and not making the big mistake to lose games and being efficient in your craft. So seeing Stafford at 6, I don't think he's necessarily a largely better quarterback than Dak Prescott. I think those guys can switch roles on any given day, essentially, where Dak may play over his head and Matty can play way below his head, and they can kind of meet somewhere in the middle on the same day. But I do think now the way the media will see it is that he has a ring, therefore he's no longer comparable to Dak Prescott. And they just confirm what they've always wanted to say about Matt Stafford, to put him above Dak Prescott. 6 on the list, but go figure. I said I circled back to Josh Allen and Tustin Herbert at both the 3 and 7. And the reason why I see both of these guys here 3 and 7, I kind of want to address that when it comes to the media and their perspectives and their perceptions of players and quarterbacks especially, is that these 2 guys are on this list. They're separated by 1 year of age, according to the graphic, one being 25, one being 24. Stylistically, they're kind of similar players. And again, we talk about who made this list, who made these rankings. It's the scouts. And I'll never forget the scouts that just drooled over Josh Allen based on his collegiate skill set of being tall, being mobile, having a huge arm. And Tustin Herbert kind of fits that same profile, being tall, mobile, huge arm. I will say this, when it comes to the arm talent and the raw tools that both of these players have, I can see where they would fall on someone's top 10 listing. I totally understand that. But harkening back to my point about story arcs when it comes to quarterbacks, I'm going to ask you guys, just national media guys, if you guys come across my video or whatever, tell me right now when this thing happens, because the biggest point of these 2 guys being top 10 is that one word that gets people fired in the NFL. Execs, I'm talking to you. Potential. The word potential is tossed around so much when it comes to young players in the NFL. So I need you guys in the national media to tell me and the fans, tell us when potential runs out. Tell me when a guy is who a guy is. And this is more kind of projecting for the next couple seasons and where we're going further in the future. But when it comes to guys like Josh Allen and Tustin Herbert, Let me know when is a good time or when is the deadline for us to stop talking about their potential and start talking about who they are and start being critical of them for not winning championships. And it's perfect that we're talking about guys like Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, because those two guys that are playing on franchises, and just making the comparison to Dak Prescott, those two guys that we're talking about in those franchises that have not won anything, that have no rings, if you're going to chide Dak Prescott for not being a winner and not winning at the highest level in the NFL or the highest level in sport and achieving that pinnacle, if you're going to do that, then I want you to tell me when's a good time for us to start flipping the narrative on Josh Allen, Justin Herbert. So is it now, after this season? Is it at 28 years old with Dak Prescott? To be honest, with Dak Prescott, he's been given, he's good but not great, or he's good but never going to win a championship from his own fan base, by the way, since being, 27, 26? So let me know, media, or let me know, fans on Twitter that are anti-Dak Prescott. Let me know when is a good time to stop talking about potential and start talking about what these guys actually are, what they've actually done with their careers. Let me know, because that's how I feel about these guys listed at 3 and 7 on your list. Just let me know. And then going back to number 8, Russell Wilson. Again, Russell Wilson is that guy that won a championship early in his career. He was given the elite status, largely ignoring by national media. And I think you know who I'm talking about. That guy on the 3-letter network that talks a big game, talks a lot, has his same guys that he always supports. You know who I'm talking about. That guy. But that guy is one that will never stop praising Russell Wilson, no matter what it is. His love for Russell Wilson is unbound by anything that I've ever seen from a sports media member. And Russell Wilson is that guy that, again, granted, he won a championship early in his career. He did very well for himself on a team that was aided by so much help and support, a premier defense, a sound running game, a defense that rivals the defense that not on the level of like the 2000 Ravens, but they are all the same, a historic type of defense that won a championship game with a running back who, for all we know, may make the Hall of Fame. He's won that championship in his career, but has not been close since then. Of course, losing the Super Bowl the prior season. Losing the Super Bowl to New England. But how long can you ride that wave? How long is he allowed to ride the wave? How long is he allowed to escape the excuse of he doesn't have enough help? Whereas the one quarterback that we root for has too much help. And when he doesn't have any help, he needs to overcome that. Or he needs to win despite of everything. Because we just saw what happened when the franchise in Seattle couldn't support or incubate their quarterback with help, and what happened to him. And he turned it into a pumpkin. So he hasn't been that elite guy, for being honest, for the last maybe 3 or 4 seasons. So at some point, I want to understand, when you make your top 10 list, if Russell Wilson can stay on that list for prior accomplishments for so long, I need to figure out why that is. And why is he not, why is he allowed to not elevate the talent around him like someone that we know is supposed to do that no matter what's going on, despite of what's happening? So kind of curious about that. And then at number 9 on the list is Deshawn Watson. I'm not going to talk about the stuff with Deshaun Watson that's happening away from the field, because I feel like that's been discussed and needs to be discussed. But it's been discussed ad nauseum. I think people understand there's a lot going on with that. And we can do a whole video or whole segment on the NFL and Deshaun Watson. But I want to talk about this comparison, though, with Dak Prescott and Deshaun Watson, and almost from a really superficial but yet surface level. Actually, both the same, superficial and surface level, which is people that think, and I get it, on this particular list, he's only just one spot ahead of Dak Prescott. Now, 2 years ago, if we had that, just 2 years ago, if we said, hey, I think that Deshaun Watson is better than Dak Prescott, and you lay out your case, I'd understand. I'd still say, hey, both players, when both of them field, they're both playing. It's like Coke and Pepsi. Look the same, taste the same, get down the same, no big deal. Or do the same, put it that way. And I had to say, for what's been said about Dak Prescott, a lot of the people who staunchly defend Deshaun Watson in the last 2 years and this crusade against him and Dak Prescott, especially media members. A lot of people that do that, and again, even fans as well, because let's keep it real. The fans, they take the cue or they take the baton from the national media to regurgitate back to you on social media as a counterpoint. What they didn't come up with themselves, they get it from somebody else. It's like say rat poison. They get it from the hive and share it with everybody else. But my point to this is, if you think that Deshaun Watson is clearly better, infinitely better than Dak Prescott, the points of your conversation shouldn't be on physical characteristics, that he's faster or he's more elusive. The fact of the matter is, 2 years ago, I could buy the argument that either one could fall on either side of the coin if you flipped it. And I wouldn't argue too much with it. But there's something to be said about Deshaun Watson when he has not played football in 2 years. He hasn't played football in 2 years. He hasn't necessarily achieved any tangible success in the playoffs that, again, we hold Dak Prescott to this odd standard to, that should be a much better quarterback given the help he's had around him. But we talk about help when it comes to somebody like Deshaun Watson. He's had for much of his career, he's had until Houston went stupid, he had DeAndre Hopkins. He had one of the best players on defense in the NFL for years in J.J. Watt. He had Watt and didn't do squat. So again, and blew an enormous lead in the postseason to lose that game, yet he's still held on this pedestal by some people that think he's definitively better than Dak Prescott. And his list, whether it be one spot or not, still says in people's minds and still wants to establish in people's minds that Deshaun Watson is a better quarterback than Dak Prescott, despite not playing football at a proficient level or winning football at a proficient level for 2 years. So oddly enough, and of course, when it comes to Dak Prescott, I didn't want to do this video and only speaking of the praises of Dak Prescott, and only saying that Dak Prescott is an elite quarterback. Dak Prescott is a fine quarterback. And to the people that think that there's only Dak staunch supporters and there's no in between where either, and this is how it actually works, that people think Dak sucks or Dak is a great top tier quarterback that belongs somewhere in your top 3 on your list. I don't agree with either of that. I think Dak Prescott is a very good quarterback on any given day that can play way above his head. And if things aren't right as far as the protection goes, he's going to struggle. But guess what? That's mostly any quarterback in the NFL. They're going to struggle without their pieces, without adequate coaching, adequate play calling. That's the way it works in the NFL. But if you're going to be beholden to the point that Dak Prescott is not a good quarterback, well, guess what? I implore you to look at these statistics, look at the advanced stats, efficiency, accuracy, EPA, whatever number you want to go with, whatever nice number that you like to follow on Twitter or like to follow that's given to you. Please compare Dak Prescott. And I ask that you guys do this. If you're going to be that person, please be that person in the Cowboys fan base that only wants to hold Dak to a certain standard, but nobody else. If you have something to say about Dak Prescott, by all means, when it comes to a statistic, a tangible stat, please look at the entire NFL, the entire starting quarterbacks, and compare him to that. Because I don't want to see any arguments about Dak Prescott that begin with, well, Dak Prescott is X in this stat. And then when someone rebuttals with, well, look at everybody else. And then the rebuttal to that is, well, I only care about the Cowboys. Then why are we having this conversation? Simple as that. Why are we even talking about this? So when it comes to Dak Prescott, I will just say this list be damned. Dak Prescott, in my mind, is somewhere in the ballpark of a top 7 quarterback. And when he's really on his game, especially at the height of his game last year around that Patriots game in overtime, he was an MVP candidate. And that's where he is. He's a top 7 quarterback in the NFL. And on some days, maybe can flirt his way with probably the top 4, top 3. That's how I feel about it. But that's how I feel about this list. So guys, thank you guys for watching. Again, my first time doing a video like this. Very fun to do stuff like this every now and then. But thanks for watching. And again, hit that like button, hit that sub button, and just let me know what you think in the comment section, where you feel like Dak Prescott belongs on this list and how you feel about the other quarterbacks on this list as well. But thanks for watching. And as always, Cowboys up. Peace.